Today we're talking to Greta Garner Hewitt. She's the author of a fun new book called The Cop Cookbook, filled with TV and movie cops. And it's appropriate since Greta is the daughter of James Garner.
He was not just on TV, he was in some great movies. I remember a Doris Day movie that he was in that is one of my favorite movies.
Actually, I think he was in a couple with her.
And then, of course, he did some Westerns, the sheriff movies. And,
support your local sheriff, support your local gunfighter.
So you not only had a TV star, but a movie star at the same time as a dad. And did it mean anything to you?
Not really. I'm 40 years old, and while I was growing up, I really couldn't appreciate it, but I really do now. And, making the transition, one thing that I find, if I can sort of step away and look objectively at his career, that is so amazing about his career is that he was able to go from TV to movies, from TV to movie, movie to TV.
That's pretty rare.
That is very difficult because you get sort of typecast, and of course he did Maverick and things like that,
Right.
and then he was able to go on to do films and go back to TV and do films. So that's one thing that I really admire about his longevity in his career.
It seemed to me like everybody likes him. He's such a trusted person. He's just the kind of guy that everybody liked all the time. Did that ever get in the way, like if you guys were going out to the park or to the store or something, where you started to regret that?
Where I started to regret
Yeah,
it?
well, because obviously it would take away your time.
Well, you know what? That's just part of it. It's a double-edged sword.
You just get used to it.
He's a public person, and the public wants to, talk to him and see him, and he's been in their living room every night, forever.
I was surprised to read that your dad can't eat onions or garlic. It says that in the book.
Right. One of the many trivia facts that came out in the Cop Cookbook. No, he hates them. So we have to make everything without it. I think I spilled the beans on that. Was it in the Mexican restaurant, Mexican recipe, or was it the dressing recipe?
Well, that was a Mexican one.
Was it?
I'm not sure, but I just remember reading that and thinking, that's strange.
Yeah, no, he doesn't like them. He doesn't. There's some really interesting trivia in this book.
There is.
We found, oddly enough, we found that Jack Webb, of course, from Dragnet fame, and he was a great big LAPD supporter. As a matter of fact, I just went out to the LAPD Academy, and they had a great big building dedicated in his name, I guess, that he funded. But he had a Chinese restaurant called the China Trader. And I, being with my PI background, of course, was able to track down a friend of his that had a picture of it. And, of course, it's been knocked down for 25 years. And he had a picture of the China Trader restaurant in his garage in a box. And I didn't leave him alone until he found it and sent it to me.
That's neat.
And we were able to put it in all the background of who he owned it with, and we were able to put in a Chinese recipe from the restaurant that his secretary gave me. She was his secretary for like 30-some-odd years. And so we were able to get a lot of people that you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, you have a lot of great pictures in here. You have some recipes from people I wouldn't categorize as cops, but like you have Casey Kasem, who did the voice of one of the characters on Scooby-Doo.
Right.
And I'd never associated that with, but that's true. I mean, they were ghost hunters, I guess, or something like that.
Okay, so we went out on a limb here.
Right.
Basically, we picked anybody that had anything to do with law enforcement.
Yeah, or like Henry Mancini, who did music for like Peter Gunn and some of the great...
Exactly, and the Pink Panther. And that's correct. We just sort of...
that's what makes it interesting, though.
Really unusual people like Dame Margaret Rutherford, who played Miss Marple.
Yes.
And we also got the other Miss Marple, who is Joan Hickson.
Yeah, that's what makes the whole thing interesting, though. It's not just a limited number of people or characters that you remember. You go through the book and you go, oh, yeah, my gosh, I never thought of that. And it's just filled with all sorts of great information and trivia. You also have the sample 10 codes. I love this. These 10 codes that cops use.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Those are the real 10 codes
They are
from
real.
Nashville's Police Department. But we tried not to use any of the real graphic ones like murder or anything. We just used the nice ones, the nice 10 codes. But one other thing I wanted to mention, which was the foreword from the book is written by Robert Stack. And, of course, he played Elliot Ness on...
The Untouchables.
On The Untouchables. Right. And he wrote a lovely foreword. And we also have a lovely, we just have some really special things in the book. Like we had a friend of ours who is a retired police officer in Knoxville write an officer's grace, a blessing. It's very cute.
Who were the toughest recipes to get?
The toughest?
Yeah.
Well, the toughest on the whole were the police chiefs because...
Oh, come on.
I know. It doesn't
the
have
celebrities
to
were easier than that?
You'd think it would be hard to get one from Arnold Schwarzenegger or something.
Sure.
But, some of those people were easier than the police chiefs because police chiefs are extremely busy people.
Yeah.
One of the hardest was probably... Well, Willie Williams was difficult in L.A.
Los
and the
Angeles,
New York commissioner because they're the busiest, police chiefs in the country. And but I was able to get Willie Williams with a little prodding. And the New York commissioner, I was so frustrated because I had a recipe from everybody from Hawaii, Alaska, and every chief, and I didn't have anybody from New York. And they kept promising me, yes, he'll bring it. And I had the whole book done, and I started sending out these letters to different cities in New York. Well, must have sent out 15 letters and faxes to 15 cities in New York, and I put at the bottom, I have a recipe from every state in this country, but except for yours. I don't understand what the problem is. And the next thing I knew, I had like 10 from New York, and I did get Howard Safer, the commissioner of the New York Police Department, and he gave a recipe from his wife called Carol's Killer's Chocolate Cake, I believe. One really fun recipe in this book that is just a kick is the recipe given by William Webster, Judge William Webster, who's a former director of the FBI, his wife. And she writes the cutest thing on here that just cracked me up, but it's called FBI cake. And she writes, I made this recipe for my husband Bill the first time I cooked a meal for him when we were dating. He was FBI director at the time, and the recipe came from a cookbook called Maida Hedder's Book of Great Chocolate Desserts. The author said in her book that the recipe was called FBI cake because it was served to J. Edgar Hoover by the author's mother. Hoover liked it so much that he threatened an FBI investigation if he didn't get the recipe. Bill must have liked it. He eventually married me.
That's what's fun about this book. All sorts of little things, like you have the woman who played Cagney on Cagney and Lacey.
Yeah.
She submitted one that was from her grandma, and her grandma really published cookbooks.
Right.
And it was just fascinating to read all these little different stories. So it's a great book, and Greta, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much.
It's called The Cop Cookbook by Greta Garner Hewitt.